From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, March 12th, 2021. And you're listening to the HPS Macrocast. John Fagan and Brendan Walsh with Markets Policy Partners. I'm Tony Fratto with Hamilton Place Strategies. Guys, it was a year ago. I didn't go back and listen to it, but one of my coworkers went back and listened to, podcast, the Macrocast from a year ago, which we should probably do, just for fun. Maybe this weekend I'll go take a listen on it. But sort of this view, and I remember, you guys, everyone, all our listeners know the great Matt McDonald, who's with us usually on Jobs Day. I remember Matt came to us like, we're probably going to have to shut down the office and do work from home because this is going to be bad. And I remember thinking, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll shut down the office. Well, whatever. Like it'll be a really good experience. Everyone will learn how to work from home, and we'll go do this for like 6 weeks. And just like in retrospect, like 1 year ago, Tony is an idiot, right? Like bags of COVID.
No, I know.
My expectation is like, well, COVID's going to blow through, right? It just kind of like blows through, and then once it's gone, then we can come back to the office. So I'm thinking it's like a 4, 6, tops 8 week kind of thing. And here we are a year later, still all of HPS working from home, and we obviously learned a lot.
But like when I look back at my life, I'm like, when I was 16, I can't believe I thought that. But this year, every 2 weeks, I would look back on my life and be like, man, 2 weeks ago, I can't believe I thought that.
Well, I think early in COVID, we were going through 2 week, two week learning periods. It was we were all worried much more about washing hands than masks and those kinds of things in the sort of like early days of the fog of war. There were I think a lot of missteps. Now everyone is a epidemiologist, and we all have all spent the time reading histories of plagues and how to stay safe, and hopefully we're better for these things in the future. Certainly better for it now. I mean, I don't want to go into too much on the U.S. and COVID, because we're going to spend some time talking about Europe here, and not to go into too much detail because we talk about it. We have a whole year of talking about it. That said, on the day, week that we have the $1.9 trillion, latest COVID package out there, certainly in the United States, we're getting to a much better story. Sort of breathtaking levels of fiscal support, quick and sustained levels of monetary policy support, and now. Huge numbers of people getting vaccinated. And I saw, former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb this morning estimating that, probably somewhere around, 50% of the population is probably, either gotten COVID and so acquired antibodies, or has been vaccinated. I think the vaccination rate in the United States is, I don't know, 17% of the population, and that's got people really thinking about bursting out of the house pretty soon and getting back to coming in contact with other people and very normal economic activity. And we're starting to see the numbers.
One of the institutes that do the COVID modeling, that's really the one that everyone pays attention to, I think it's IHDA. 2 weeks ago, they had been modeling a fourth wave starting right now in the spring and then coming down. But because of the pace of the vaccinations, a week ago, they changed it. And now they're modeling essentially complete elimination of the virus by May, sometime in May. That's an amazing difference.
Truly, President Biden marking the occasion of the 1 year pandemic, the World Health Organization, officially calling it a pandemic, was a year ago yesterday. Marking it last night with a primetime address to the nation, said, all Americans will be eligible, should be eligible to get the vaccine by May 1st. You get a sense that, we're maybe by the end of May, any American who wants the vaccine will probably have it by the end of May.
It's
and
probably going to be sooner than that. But I think by May we're going to have to be convincing people.
Convincing people, yeah,
Draghi don't want to take it. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
It really is it's something. Trying to understand what the U.S. economy, what U.S. society is going to look like in this late pandemic and early post-pandemic era is something that is, we're all thinking about it in our own minds and for our own families. And market participants are obviously been grappling with it for weeks. The forward-leaning aspect of financial markets, investors are always projecting forward, and so this has been going on for months. We've seen the reflection of expectations for U.S. growth and U.S. recovery building up in the markets and changing the character and the dynamics of price action. What we have seen accelerate over the last couple of weeks, really over the last month, is the extent to which this has turned into an expression of anticipation of U.S. growth outperformance. Not just, everybody's going to get better, but that the U.S. is going to come out of this absolutely, ahead of the pack in terms of the, the force of the rebound and and potentially the price pressures that go along with it. And this is manifested in contrast to, we'll talk a little bit more about Europe later, but very, very primarily in contrast to Europe, where distribution of vaccines is much slower. So from the investor perspective, there's definitely a period of digestion here. If you told us a year ago at the outset of the pandemic that before this whole thing was over, the U.S. equity markets would be, basically almost in the middle of this episode, U.S. equity markets would be at all-time highs and rocketing northward.
Equity is at all-time high, and household balance sheets, extremely healthy.
Yep.
It's hard.
They're about to get healthier,
and they're about to get a lot healthier. Credit card debt is down, and the only thing we've really seen are home mortgages and autos, with nice big fat ticket items, because rates have been really low, and if people have had excess cash, and so they've gone down and spent it. It is kind of the American way, isn't it? I mean, maybe we're, we don't get things right away, but end up going big and actually getting things right. And it seems like we are probably getting things right.
Well, last week the cruise line, or this week, the cruise lines had their biggest booking week in history.
Do you take that as a sign, Brendan, for in other sectors?
Well, think about it. I'm excited to go to a restaurant that I haven't been in a while, but cruises are kind of like the petri dish of getting infected.
The outer edge of
We're going all in. We're skipping go and going 100 miles an hour right away. But that's the American way.
Yeah, and we've really seen this manifest in the doubts in the market about what the Fed is telling us their reaction function to this is going to be. The Fed is sort of trying to be the voice of sobriety here, saying, a lot of this is going to be transitory. We're going to have a burst of activity. We're going to have potentially a burst of inflation. On the other side of it, there is going to be a normalization. We don't want to overreact to an upside, something that really is partially statistical because of the depressed base effect. If you're looking at year over year comparisons.
Yeah, the year over year is going to be weird.
Yeah, it's going to look weird. Those numbers are going to look high, but
statistically,
market participants are pretty good at looking through statistical noise, fortunately. When it comes to putting together reassembling supply chains, that's obviously another process rather than event. And clearly there's disruption that is going to feed through to higher prices in the near term. It would be hard to bet that those aren't solved over a period of months and quarters, and that the inherent efficiency of our logistical chains, and the supply comes back to a great degree. And the disinflationary forces of the Amazon effect and mechanization of many parts of the workforce now, the unemployed coming back into the labor market as their children go back to school and as the economy recovers, and just the normal kind of disinflationary forces of efficiency and productivity gains that we've had over the previous years. The Fed is perfectly, it's perfectly reasonable for the Fed to make the case that those will reassert once, after some period of volatility in prices and growth. And that's what we expect. We expect them to hammer that message home at the upcoming meeting, the March FOMC meeting, which is on St. Patrick's Day. So we'll have our shamrocks,
some green beer, maybe some green beer. Yeah, why not? Right?
Yeah, for as soon as Chair Powell's done talking.
Yeah, I expect it'll be a good one. I mean, if you just look at private sector outlook, although again, when the criticism of this $1.9 trillion package, like, it's not exactly the way I would design it, not necessarily the size that I would prescribe. That said, when politically speaking, right, at least when the criticism is, damn, this economy's going to run just too darn hot, what side you want to be on, but that does, present potential problems for the Fed, and of course, as we've talked about many times, communications problems for them.
HPS is hiring. We are seeking a mid-level public affairs professional to join our dynamic team as a director in our Washington, D.C. office. Directors at HPS lead multiple client teams and internal projects and work in a fun, fast-paced, and challenging environment. The successful candidate has 5 to 7 years of relevant experience, is intellectually curious, and interested in public policy, in particular, the deep dive analysis that we do at HPS. To learn more about the position and opportunities at HPS, email our recruiting team at careers@hamiltonps.com.
I want to shift to Europe because, it isn't like this sort of happy outlook call in Europe. We saw Christine Lagarde yesterday, the ECB press conference, which, by the way, they did a whole new look, right? They did, they had the podiums and, it was lit for TV and, much bigger, much more beautiful presentation. Certainly even than the Fed does. There's a lot of drama. It was kind of, what I thought about when I first saw the ECB look, I thought that looks exactly the way if someone was trying to do this, like if Hollywood producers were trying to do what the press conference would look like, it would look just like that, but it never looks that way in real life, but there it was, Hollywood might have written a better ending for Europe, though. It is a rough time right now. They are not getting, even on the monetary support, ECB is trying to do what it can, given some of the conflicts in its governing council and the Germans always being Germans, and the Germans aren't the only ones, but they're the leaders of that pack, to limit some ECB activity. So even when you saw these, bond, pressure in the bond markets over the past few weeks, and purchases in the pandemic emergency purchase program, the bond buying program, actually went down, in the face of that, when you would expect it to go up, and so there was a delay in their actions. Vaccine situation is not good in Europe right now, and not only were they already slow and problems with supply and distribution, then they put this pause on AstraZeneca, because of some questions about blood clots, which don't seem to be, even in their announcement, didn't sound like they believe that there's actually an action there, but out of precaution. This is all to say, and then of course the fiscal support Who knows when it's coming, right? I mean, maybe
Yeah,
some of it might trickle out by the second half of.
No, so one of the ECB sources from the meeting yesterday, it trickled out today. The quote was, Biden just came in, the bill has already been passed, the check's going to be in the mail next week. Look at us in the meantime. We've been talking for a year and still nothing will be paid out until maybe October. That kind of sums it up.
It is.
It's funny actually. In the case of Europe, this is interesting, right? Because I mean, we should just say they do have more automatic stabilizers than we do. So there is a little bit of sort of natural automatic stabilizer support in Europe that you don't have to go to a Congress and have have a big program, but it's not near what's needed. The amount of fiscal support is nowhere close. But you look at them talking about the speed of it. But the thing that struck me with Christine Lagarde's presser yesterday was just hitting home was the point that of the amount of support for Europe that will come from because of the growth package in the United States and the growth that will come in the United States. And so in a way, like, we're providing more fiscal support for Europe than they are right now.
Yeah.
Well, I think they said 1%, it might impact 1% growth in the Eurozone, maybe.
Yeah, and the dollar is strengthening, so our summer vacations in the south of France will be that much cheaper.
That's right. Well, I guess the euro is strengthening a bit too, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'd had the euro was up at its highest level since 2018. It was at multi-year highs, as recently as early as sorry, I'm tipping the charts in my head. But the dollar weakness had been a trend of the pandemic, and that has abated to a great degree. We've seen the dollar going sideways to up over the past few weeks, and that's clearly an indication of an expression of where the relative expectations of growth are. And this is, the contrast is becoming starker, not just between the growth outlook for the coming year and maybe even beyond that, the inflation outlook and the monetary and the trajectory of monetary policy. We've seen the Fed and the European Central Bank have very different responses to this upside in longer dated treasury yields. The Fed Chair Powell, before the communications blackout, was characterizing the upside in longer dated treasury yields, the steepening of the yield curve, as something that they were watching. And if it became disorderly and to a level that would begin to work against the economic recovery, they would respond to that, implying that the current levels are nowhere near that kind of degree. Whereas the European Central Bank officials and President Lagarde have come out much more forcefully, delineating, that they'll take a stand against this. The current rise is not something that they want to see, and so we saw this yesterday play out in the meeting. They were expected to keep policy steady, which they did broadly, but they accelerated those purchases, as you said, Tony. And that certainly is, it's a statement of intent. It's a statement of purpose, and they could certainly do more down the road. Everybody knows that. They're putting their credibility on the line to try to restrain rising yields in a way that the Fed isn't prepared to do right now. And that's probably going to play out in financial markets. We expect the upside bias to be more powerful in U.S. sovereign yields, Treasury yields, and we think that translates into dollar outperformance that's more durable than just a brief sort of counter trend rally. That our expectation is that this remains relatively restrained because the Fed is able to keep its dovish line, but there's a possibility that the Fed may have to, over the summer, when the economy starts really rocking, they may have to do a little bit more in terms of, locking in some of their or actualizing some of their pushback on rising rates.
And the dollar pressure. I'm sorry, the dollar. You don't want to get it out of hand, but dollar strength is, helping on the inflation concerns, though, right? I mean,
yeah, and as we talked about yesterday,
moderating.
Yeah, and as we talked about yesterday, it's blowing some of the froth out of parts of the market that are probably concerning to policymakers, that with their lofty valuations and upside torrid upside in stocks like Tesla and that sort of thing. It's not a concern to policymakers to have some of those real high flyers correct. And to the extent that higher treasury yields and a stronger dollar do some of the tightening for the Fed, and that allows the Fed to stay on their policy line. So a modest degree of that really can be helpful. But it is if it goes too far. We expect if it does go too far, and what that level is, it's not a level, it's a pace really. If we're getting if we're going in 10 basis point chunks higher over the coming weeks, we expect the Fed to come out and start talking about their policy options, like a Operation Twist or something like that.
But that's an important point, because last week when Powell was speaking, there was people in the market that expected him to announce an Operation Twist, in Congress. That's not how the Fed works. It would be moronic to announce something and surprise it without talking about it first, because just talking about it is very powerful, and the market starts to price it in for you, and you might not have to do it. So to expect the Fed to announce an Operation Twist out of the blue, it just goes against the way that communications as a tool in monetary policy work.
I agree. I mean, look, I mean, the March 3rd Super Tuesday intermeeting FOMC announcement, that was a surprise, but that is like so exceedingly rare. If they're dealing with things that they kind of see coming, it's like, the Fed is not this Fed. The Fed, since maybe early Greenspan, even, is not into big surprises, and especially the last three Fed chairmen. It's, in fact, I was thinking about it when you were saying that, Brendan, is that the Fed, if the Fed wants to surprise you, they'll tell you.
Yeah. That's a great phrase.
Like they're going to tell you that we might surprise you in the future, so start thinking about these things, and they do that. That's the way that the Fed communicates now, and I think all in all, that's probably good. Sometimes a shock to the system is worthwhile, but I think not if you're going to do those kinds of operations. You want the market to have decent expectation of what policy is going to be. Europe, sometimes I joke about them, and I get frustrated with them sometimes. You got to feel for them. So I actually, sympathy for Lagarde yesterday, because she wants more. She said expressly, and she tried to stay in her lane on monetary side, but called expressly for more fiscal support. And guys like, I think we didn't hail it. We applauded it. It was a polite applause back when they passed the fiscal support act last year. I think not even until just like getting ready for this show that I realized just how little is going to be spent this year. And if you had told me back then that the amount of support through summer is going to be a lot, pretty close to zero, I would have been aghast, And so when I say sympathy for, for monetary policy authorities who always seem to be having to beg fiscal authorities to do, grab an oar and do their pooling, it is really tough in Europe, given that the governing structure they have, and this is not at all adequate for what Europe needs right now.
Yeah, that's right. And the current European leadership, it's the sort of Angela Merkel, Macron, Northern European alliance that's set the tone for Europe for a really long time. Angela Merkel especially, and we're seeing potentially the poles of power moving south in a decisive way in Europe. Mario Draghi, the heroic European central banker, the Mr. Whatever it takes, the guy who deftly dragged the European Central Bank into its role as a savior of the continent's financial system in the 11 and 12 European debt crisis. he's not done.
He's
And
not
you
done.
mentioned
You know,
him.
we'll all take Super Mario to the rescue. He's obviously one of the more talented and resourceful and committed policymakers in Europe, and I think will go down in history as one of the really great and important leaders of this era. But boy, they have such a task, don't they? I mean, it's not just, we talk about Europe as Europe. If you spent any time paying attention to Europe, the northern-southern divide, which you just referenced. One of the problems of COVID being a limiting contact means that those economies that rely so heavily on tourism as a greater share of GDP, places like Italy, Greece, Europe, Spain, and Portugal, those southern European countries really rely on tourism. This double dip, I think we're going to see another, proof or have the proof of a second recession in Europe, and it particularly hits those southern countries that rely more, greater share of their GDP relies more on tourism, and I think it's going to be a very tough time for them.
Yeah, and I think that this particular, in the past, the European debt crisis, the Northern Europeans were very much blaming the Southern Europe. This is their fault, the spendthrift Southern Europeans. It seems like that was the kind of dynamic. This, pandemic, it's it's hard to really point fingers here. Obviously countries are coming into it in different conditions. But the European Central Bank and the European Union in general has operated in a much more even-handed manner than they have in the past. With this, as slow as this fiscal bill is, it's really deployed by needs rather than some formula, some arcane formula. The money going to Spain and Italy, the places that really need it the most, that's not that looks like fiscal federalism. That's not what Europe had been about in the past. And so COVID kind of broke the dam on that, and one suspects that it might be a hard to repair. And when Mario Draghi, in his first speech as Italian prime minister, pushes for a pan-European budget to confront emergencies like this, that's that next leg forward toward this. Unlike Angela Merkel, has often been criticized as being a local politician, a very German politician, and not having a real vision for Europe as a whole. Whether that's fair or not, it's certainly clear that she has presided over a period in which the the European project has faced a lot of tests, but has come through it. And maybe Mario Draghi clearly has an even more aggressively Europe EU unity bent, and with Christine Lagarde as the head of the ECB, the two of them make a pretty powerful combination. And we've seen reports come out of the ECB that the bond purchasing has specifically been focused on keeping yields in places like Italy down. It is it's designed to, the monetary policy is clearly designed to facilitate fiscal policy. It is designed to allow larger fiscal deficits in places like Italy to go on without upsetting the bond market. And that is that linkage between, just to roll the tape back, in the in the US, even as early as earlier this year, there was a sense that if the fiscal impulse is large, that means the Fed can do less. That's not how they're, and I think that formulation is eroding in the US, but that is definitely not what they're doing in Europe. It's certainly not what they're doing in Japan and other global central banks. The alignment of those two policies together for monetary policy, in some ways, protecting the flank of fiscal policy from an untoward reaction in bond markets, is something that we're seeing very clearly in Europe.
And so, looking at the outlook, how are you guys seeing the outlook for Europe this year? Her projection was, for a recession negative growth in the first quarter. If that happens, with negative growth in the fourth quarter last year, you've got recession. She's still projecting. I think she said 4% growth. For the year in real growth. So that is projecting a fairly strong second half. What I thought was interesting though was the inflation expectations were still pretty muted, right? I mean,
yeah, and it's been going in the wrong direction the last few months.
Yeah, and if you're a central bank, I mean, the question I would have is, you're telling us how much you're doing. The words she used, right, were significant. Significantly higher pace of net purchases in bond buying. She didn't give a number on what significantly higher means, but I would not be surprised that sort of doubling where the average was for this year. That said, though, even with significantly higher purchases, you're still nowhere clear or close to your 2% target.
Not even close.
Slightly below 2% target. Their projections with significant bond buying still is only putting them at 1.5% inflation projections. And you have to ask, well, is significant a good enough adjective? Could would enormously or gigantically be a better adjective to get to the size that you need to get closer to what your monetary policy target is?
Yeah,
well, they're not going to get it. I don't think they're going to get it.
Yeah, well, I mean, they need an assist from the U.S. I think, as we said. I mean, the strength of the euro is a major drag on continental inflation, and so a U.S. decoupling period where we have the U.S. economy roaring ahead, and a modest and sustained but moderate upside in the dollar from these multi-year lows, that would do a lot to help the reflationary impulse in the EU. And,
to your point, Tony,
they know that
this is a behavior issue. I don't know what the answer is, but so many of the southern countries are reliant on tourism. But is the vaccinated U.S. tourists going to go to Europe even if they're not fully under control with COVID this summer?
I think I will.
Yeah.
I'm sort of looking forward to.
Probably get a deal to go.
If you guys listen, people listen to the show, they know that I go to Europe quite a bit, go to France and Italy quite a bit, and I'm hoping to be able to go to Italy this summer. And I would never go without a vaccination, and would still like to see sort of a preponderance of people vaccinated in order to do that. I do think we're going to get there. Like even their projections, we should say it's a really slow start. We're going to beat them by a few months to get to numbers that allow a return to normal economic activity. But they are projecting that by the end of summer, some 70% of the European population will have been vaccinated. That's a pretty significant achievement if they get there. That's at least their goal, and we hope they do. All right, guys, fun Europe talk. We haven't had a whole Europe show for a while. Glad we got it in, and we'll take another look at it, make it a little bit more semi-regular, because it is important. I think you forget when you hear things about how what the growth impact is going to be of the growth in the U.S. providing this engine of growth, and that it could pull Europe along a little bit. It reminds you that the economies are. There are a lot of network effects between the two economies, and some correlations, and so we should make sure we're paying regular attention to it. But next week we have FOMC. We'll get back into US. It is next week, right? Yeah, that is. Yeah. St. Patrick's Day.
That's right.
Week. Good fun. We'll be ready for it.
That's right.
All right, guys, have a fantastic weekend.
Up for...
Yeah, let's do it. We'll do it.
Yeah. Every time he says
Brendan.
Transitory inflation, you have to have a drink.
Well, I have to say, I'll be in New York City for it, and we'll see whether they do a parade. I can't remember if they're going to do any kind of parade. What happens in New York is they end up parading on their own, whether it's sanctioned or not. You know, this is called a bar crawl, and you dress green. You know, so, outdoor bar crawl. Guys, have a great weekend. We'll be back on the Macrocast next week.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.